Hello, I'm Steve DeLong, co-CEO, founder, and chairman of Blue Tree Dental. As we embark on the WeCareMore philosophy and the integration of the WeCareMore branding into the organization, there are 5 areas that I believe it's very important that we define as opportunities and some obstacles as we implement. The first is establishing the ideal. The second is understanding the organization's history, where we've come from, where we are, and where we hope to go. Also understanding the impacts of growth on the WeCareMore philosophy and how do we address that. The fourth is unifying under a common ideal and the obstacles and opportunities that presents. And the last is the strategy and execution of the WeCareMore philosophy and branding inside of the organization. For the last several months, we have been talking about the WeCareMore philosophy inside Blue Tree. And so this opportunity today is just to kind of talk about the why behind WeCareMore. And it's a long story, but I think what I hope everybody remembers about WeCareMore and about why we are embarking on this journey is the simple fact that it's the only thing that people really care about is whether or not we care. And so we've heard different things over time. We've heard it in movies. We've heard different quotes about people don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. One of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. One of the favorite lines from Forrest Gump is, I'm not a smart man, but I know what love is. And I always think about that. Like, you know, our patients, our people in this organization, our co-workers, they may not know exactly what we're doing to them that day in the office, but they do know whether or not we care. And so as we kind of embark on this WeCareMore journey, what I hope is that we're just kind of verbalizing and putting some parameters and framework around something that we're already doing. And so there's some obstacles as we implement a new kind of framework, or we talk about the WeCareMore strategy. And I see those obstacles that they are also opportunities. One is kind of the ideal, the obstacle of, well, you know, chasing the ideal. The second is just the obstacle of our history, you know, overcoming history and the opportunity that provides us, and also the obstacle that it can be. The obstacle of growth. We've been a growing organization that adds more people, more practices, but it's also an opportunity to impact more people. The fourth thing is kind of the second definition of ideal, or another ideal, and that is kind of the actual defining of what the ideal is in that. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And the last thing, or the fifth kind of obstacle and opportunity, is the strategy and execution behind WeCareMore. So what are we going to do to implement it, you know, inside of our organization? So I'll first talk about kind of the ideal. And because when we say WeCareMore, that's a bold statement in and of itself. So we have to kind of add some context to it. So one of the definitions of ideal is a principle or value that one actively pursues as a goal, an ultimate object or aim. So we have to understand that the WeCareMore statement is somewhat of a promise, but more of an ideal, something that we are working towards and constantly working towards. One of the definitions around that is it's like this imaginary place that we're always kind of seeking and searching for, and trying to just tweak and refine the organization around it. So that it can be an obstacle for us, but it's also an opportunity to keep us focused on that, that what we're trying to achieve isn't necessarily where we're at, It may not even be where we can be, but it's this constant journey and constant process for us. So we can look at it as an obstacle or an opportunity to continue to refine the organization and ourselves, more importantly. The second thing is history. When we started this organization, we're small, 2 practices, dentistry for kids, orthodontic partners. And we started with kind of the thought that we wanted to make the best care and experience more accessible for all patients. That when they came in, we treated everyone the same, regardless of how they paid for that, whether it was cash, whether it was insurance, whether in some cases Medicaid. So we started to kind of create the idea that we're going to care for each person as individuals. And so we started that philosophy, and we want to continue to seek out partners who have that same philosophy. So we will continue to kind of go through the history of the organization and try to hold true to that, as we felt like as we held true to that it will allow us to execute, execute on kind of that vision. Growth becomes an obstacle for us because we're no longer 2 offices, and maintaining kind of a culture is more a relationship when you have a small tribe. But the tribe's gotten bigger, and we have 50 plus offices and 400 plus employees, and it's continuing to grow. So that becomes an obstacle for us, but also an opportunity to touch more lives, to impact more people. And as we grow, I think that is also a driving factor for kind of the We Care More approach, is that it kind of leads us to kind of that next step of kind of how do we unify the organization under something that we can all get behind, and that we can define, that we can create a framework. And that kind of leads me to that other definition of ideal. The ideal is another definition of ideal is kind of a conception of. So like if I say, what's the, that pool is the ideal temperature. Well, what does that mean? Is that, to me, it's one thing, to you it might mean something else. My wife and I have this argument all the time about just the actual temperature outside. It's like, oh, 75 degrees is like ideal, that's perfect. My wife's like, no, the ideal is 85 degrees, or it has to be warm, or it has to be this. So ideal can also be defined in different ways. It could be so that's an obstacle for us to kind of create the framework as an organization of where we can unite behind and get behind, and we can agree and get consensus. And so the We Care More kind of approach also helps us to address kind of that definition of ideal. We have to put some framework in place that gives us freedom to deliver a caring experience to our team, to our patients, and we have to be able to make sure that we do it in such a way that at least we're all in the same ballpark. The temperature might be 75 to 85, but it's in that range. Like, we have to make sure that we know that no one's going to argue that we don't care if we're in that range. And so some of the things that we are working on and that we'll see over time is we have a leadership checklist that we're working on to kind of define what does it mean to be a caring leader. We're developing our patient promises that our practice managers and our providers and owners are working to kind of unite under, 8 or 10 things that we as a group want to deliver to every patient. And it's a framework. There's freedom within that framework, but in the end, we need our patients to walk away feeling like we care about them. And we need our team members to do the same. So as we work through the leadership checklist to kind of, hey, what's a caring leader? We also have kind of our patient promises so that we know as an organization kind of what that ideal area is for a patient experience. Then we also are working on what we call the care guide, and the care guide is a monumental effort, really. It's going to happen in stages, but it really begins with an understanding of why we have this We Care More philosophy, the ideal that it is that we're always working towards, the promises we make to our patients, and then how do we deliver on those promises. So it will be somewhat of a clear presentation of the patient experience. So what does it look like in each, regardless of specialty, regardless of location, how do we define that ideal patient experience? And then from that position of the care guide, we set that stage, then we can start to build on the framework of how do we deliver it from a team member perspective. So how are we a caring business associate, or a clinical assistant, a provider, or someone on the administrative team, or in somewhere else. So we have to use the care guide to kind of say, well, how are we caring in facilities? How do we make sure we have the technology up to date? How do we make sure that our building is clean and neat? How do we do it in compliance? So being an organization that cares more, it has to permeate the organization, all departments and all practices. They all have to unite under that. So that uniting under that framework of what the ideal is, and that's achievable, and that there is freedom within that framework, is a very important opportunity and obstacle in the organization that we're continuing to work towards. And the last opportunity and obstacle is really just the strategy and implementation of the We Care More kind of philosophy, and that is, in some ways we're trying to keep it simple, and we have to set and implement the standard and the ideal of We Care More. We then have to recruit like-minded team members and providers and new practices, because as we develop the framework and we've created the ideal, then it's a tool for us to in our recruitment process of practices, of team members, of providers, and we can very openly and clearly say, hey, here is the expectation that Blue Tree has. This is how we care more for our patients, for our team members, for our community. And if you want to unite with us in that effort, then we'd love to have you. And if that's not consistent with what your values are, then there may be a different group for you, or a different practice, or something of that nature. So it's an interesting kind of process, and we hope that the We Care More philosophy not only permeates through our organization, but we're also developing kind of a last component is how we care more for our community, in general, and how can we meet needs within it. But this is going to be a process that's going to happen over time. We have these two definitions of ideal. We have kind of this ideal that may never reach, but we're always striving for. And then we have the conception of ideal. Well, what's the ideal temperature? What's the ideal patient experience? Well, we can put some framework and parameters around that, and then we can work towards training and recruiting and putting systems and processes around that. And so, ideals is kind of an important aspect of this. I can say this just kind of in closing, that I understand that the kind of We Care More philosophy puts pressure on our organization. It puts pressure on me, it puts pressure on our team, it puts pressure on our providers to actually deliver. And but I think personally it's a healthy pressure. It's like when someone comes up to me and says, hey Steve, I trust you. Well, there's pressure that comes with that trust, and now I have to actually live up to that standard, or I have to live up to that expectation. And so I think it's important for us to not shy away from putting a little bit of pressure on ourselves in the organization to really strive to care more. And that process in my mind is like I said, working towards this place that's hard to define, but we kind of know what it's not, right? We don't have to be a genius to know what it's not, like Forrest Gump. We know, like, well, that's not really caring. But we can also start with, well, we need to be, well, we need to be the most caring practice in our neighborhood at first. We need to be the most caring maybe group. Maybe we need to be the most caring of all practices or all groups. Like there's an evolution of how we care more, and sometimes we can easily define that. I'd like to be the most caring front desk person. I'd like to be the most caring person in our billing and billing department, or whatever the case is. Like we can make parameters and work towards that as an organization. So I think I've covered kind of all of the things that I feel kind of are behind the We Care More philosophy and how we continue to work towards it at all levels and all departments. You'll continue to see some additional branding come out from the organization and our logos. We'll start seeing on our websites. We talked about it, our team forward, about how we care more about our patients. So there's some framework there about how we deliver on our patient promises, how we care more about their comfort, how we care more about their whole body health, how we care more about their finances, and so forth. So we have to start to defining these areas and create the framework around them. But again, why we care more is because in the end, that's all anybody really cares about, is whether or not we care. And I'm grateful to be a part of this organization, and it's been a great 12 years. It's been a challenging 12 years, but I think really this is kind of the next phase of Blue Tree Dental, is really defining an expectation, feeling a little pressure of that expectation, and then uniting under it to deliver on those goals and those ideals. And so I'm grateful to be here to do a small part in leading that, but in the end, I'm just grateful that we have a strong team of 400 going on 500 team members, that as we all focus on caring a little bit more, we can really accomplish great things. So thank you very much for everything that you do, and we'll see you next time.